Greetings, webinar attendees. We're so glad you want to know more about Social Media 101 for arts educators, teaching artists, and administrators. My colleague, Jessica Wilt, is here with us today, and we serve on the Education Council for the Americans for the Arts, which is a national advocacy group. And we're so fortunate that Jessica is such an expert on this. She is our Education Committee Chair for Americans for the Arts, and she brings a lot of social media expertise to our committee work, where we're able to make advocates out of people through social media. Today I invited her to talk more about art schools and arts classrooms and come at it from a beginner level so that we can build upon it going forward. Who am I? I'm Christy Calloway, your Executive Director for Art Schools Network. I'm glad to be a servant to you. Art Schools Network is about meeting the needs of art school leaders. And if you think you have a unique solution to a shared problem, I would be happy to schedule a conversation about a webinar featuring your solution. But today we're here for Social Media 101. And while you hear the presentation and the discussion, please look at the side box or the side of your screen, and you'll notice there's questions and chat. The chat isn't really as valuable to us as the questions, because that we're able to share with everyone, as well as the polls. So we hope that you'll take advantage of the question box on the right and the polls as we go on. So here we are with Jessica Wilt. She is the founder of Arts Ed Tech New York City. I want her to tell us about that first and what she does with her time most of the time professionally, and then we'll get into our education. So Jessica, welcome to the No More webinar about your favorite topic, social media.
Thanks, Christy. I'm really happy to be here with you today. As you mentioned, I'm the chair of Americans for the Arts Education Council, and I'm actually here in Americans for the Arts New York City office today as we speak. So it was actually blogging through Americans for the Arts blog that really opened the door and introduced me to a few different social media platforms, in particular Twitter. And I know it sounds crazy, but Twitter over the last year or two of really being actively engaged using that platform has changed my life, both personally and professionally. And when we get to Twitter, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But about a year ago, I founded Arts Ed Tech NYC as a meetup group. If you're not familiar with Meetup, it's a fantastic website for connecting with people over similar interests, and arts education and technology is a personal interest of mine, how technology is being utilized in the classroom as a vehicle for teaching and learning.
Would we be able to share that, Jessica, as a follow-up, whatever wonderful suggestions? I'll happily email to our attendees. Great.
That would be great. And I assume that the slide deck will also be shared, Christy?
Absolutely, yes.
Good.
And this
Good.
webinar
Okay.
recording, so they can look at the slide deck, they can listen to the entire webinar with the slide deck, and then they can have the links that you provide afterwards. We'll have them all on our website, free.
Perfect.
Yes. Okay, great.
I will be happy to share that after our time today. So anyway, it's a platform for connecting people and continuing this conversation. So today we're focusing on social media and really a basic overview of a few platforms that you can better utilize for your own personal work in the field of arts education. There's so many options out there available today with social media apps and networks and platforms, but sometimes it can be overwhelming, and just rule of thumb for me is I like experimenting with various platforms and figuring out which ones work best for me. You can go on to that next slide. Are we going to jump into the polling questions?
Yeah, would you like to?
Yeah, let's do that
Gary to launch that. So the first poll question, Gary, get that up there for us.
How familiar are you with using social media platforms? Are you a beginner, an intermediate, or an expert? If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to select which one best fits your level of expertise, that will be helpful for me to know as we move
Everyone
forward.
voted. The vote is in.
Great. I unfortunately cannot see. Oh, there we go. So we're at an intermediate level, sounds like. No experts?
You're it,
Great.
baby.
Let's move on to the next polling question.
Gary, prompt us.
What social media platform do you use the most? Now, I selected these 3 as the top ones because they seem to be the most popular. So go ahead and take a second to answer this question.
Wow, that's interesting. This is so interesting. 100% voted. Whoops.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Facebook in general is the most popular platform, and especially when it comes to our younger generations and our youth. I'll talk a little bit about Facebook more in a minute. All right, and there's one more polling question. Are you using it for your personal, professional, or for both?
Cool. Cool. I think these people are more intermediate than they're acknowledging.
For whatever reason, I'm getting a delay. Oh, I see. Okay, both. Great. That probably I was expecting would be the answer. Great. So we can move forward now with the slides. So here are a few arts education. Actually, if you go back one for a second.
Whoops.
Here are a few that I think are best for arts education in general. We just did some polling about Facebook and Twitter. I did not include LinkedIn because I feel that's more of a professional networking job search resource. I know some people are starting up groups on LinkedIn based around a school or an organization, but I won't be focusing so much on LinkedIn today. And the others, Pinterest, Google+, Instagram, Tumblr. I've picked 4 of these that I'll go more in depth. Next slide, please. So Facebook. I think in general we're all most familiar with Facebook in our personal lives, and I have 2 separate ways that I use Facebook. My private personal page really is for family and friends, and I keep that as private as possible. But there are also the group page option that provides some really fantastic analytics. There's opportunities for marketing and advertising, if that's something that you're interested in when it comes to social media. A lot of content sharing is happening on Facebook with photos, videos, great way to share upcoming events.
I have a principal at one of our schools. I know I just jumped in. I know you can't see my body language.
Fine.
I'm excited for the topic. Jackie Collins at Idaho Arts Charter uses Facebook entirely for communications with students and parents. I mean, she still does the traditional stuff that has to go home and get a signature, but with regards to communicating on a daily basis, they make use of groups. And so they'll have one that's PTA and one that's dance moms and one that's, and I mean that in a positive way. I'm not referring to the show.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to this, and I know in the school environment there's always a concern about privacy. But when it comes to the group pages, and Facebook is pretty great about setting up private pages so that it's by invite only. So it's a great way to share information in a secure way, and I agree with you, Christy. I think we're moving more in the direction where go-to places like Facebook and Twitter for information in real time is the way in which we're headed. And then Pew Institute does fantastic research around social media, especially when it comes to our kids. And 94% of teen social media users that they surveyed last year that Facebook was their top go-to source for social media, and 81% said that Facebook is the profile that they personally use most often.
Wow.
Go ahead and we'll move on to the next slide.
Ooh, I love your images here.
So Pinterest is something that I've been exploring a little bit more on my own, and I have a few amazing arts education colleagues who are using Pinterest in the classroom. So the way Pinterest works, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a virtual pin board of content where you can pull whatever you can find online and create these pins that create a really beautiful visual board of
Wow.
content. It tends to be
I could see
very
costume
heavily
boarding or,
photo-driven.
oh yeah, visual
Anything.
sets,
I mean,
theater. I'm
it's
thinking of classroom too.
well,
Problem,
this
yeah.
example that you can see right here, I'm sharing from a colleague of mine, Otto Drywick, who teaches at Adelphi University out on Long Island.
Ooh.
Instead of assigning written work, these long research papers that tend to be really boring and not engaging, she teaches a ballet history unit, and each of her
Ooh.
students create their own personal Pinterest boards around a topic of interest. And this was an example of famous female ballerinas.
Wow.
So it pulls information from the web, and you see these beautiful images, and then you can click and open them up, and there's even more information that can be shared. So if you can imagine
That's exciting.
in your own classroom, instead of listening to a student read verbatim a research report that they've written, how beautiful and visual something like this could be used. Also in an online portfolio for showcasing student work.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a few schools in Rhode Island that are starting to do that district-wide. And finally, we did this with Americans for the Arts for one of our blog salons last year, the early childhood salon, I believe. And we pinned all kinds of rich information and content around early childhood and the arts education environment, which is open source. All of these things are, if you're posting something that's live, that's not secured as private, if it's live, anyone has access to it. So Pinterest, I think, is a great tool to use in the classroom.
Absolutely. I remember with Americans for the Arts when we did the Pinterest board, it was on early childhood education arts, and we started it, but the community at large, be whoever, I don't know any of them because it's the World Wide Web, they started creating their own boards, and I get weekly updates of the people who have created their own boards, and I swear I now have a cohort of pre-early childhood, lessons that were all just like clip art pin boards. They're little,
it's funny how you start with one topic or subject, and then it just continuously snowballs and expands, and you find other things online that you never really could have imagined. So I would highly recommend Pinterest as a way to explore content that's very visual in the way it's shared. We can move on to the next one. Now, Google+. There's a lot of good press and bad press out there right now about Google+. Basically, it's part of the suite of Google tools. And Google+ includes an interactive community that I would say looks very similar in nature to a Facebook page. But instead of inviting friends, you have these groups or these circles where you could follow people, and you can organize those circles based on your personal and professional connections. I'm not exactly sure yet where Google+ is headed, but one of my absolute favorite things about Google+ is the Google Hangout. And Google Hangout is very similar to video with Skype. It's a video conferencing platform. You can have up to 10 people actually interacting via a video chat that anyone can watch.
I love this.
Also,
this is how the Arts Integration Committee works. They've got me into this, where they'll spontaneously want to meet, and then so Arnold April that just happens to be the lead guy, he'll like float out the bubble that all of a sudden shows up that says, hey, let's have a chat. And then
everybody pops up.
Yeah, it's great. And what's fun is it wasn't scheduled, but I would imagine if scheduled, it would be really cool.
And it's also a wonderful way to share information like what we're doing right now. You can do presentations via Google Hangout. They can be recorded live, and then instantly, once you go offline, they're saved as YouTube video clips. so you can share the information that's recorded. Again, if you're in a classroom environment, you can use this within your classroom and it can be shared later, which leads me to the next bullet point, connected classrooms, which is a newer platform that Google has launched within the past year. It's essentially a virtual field trip. And I know teachers who are connecting their classrooms to other classrooms from all over the world. And they're having incredibly rich, engaging conversations with each other around a specific topic. And I've seen it in action, and it's wonderful. So if you have the connectivity, that tends to be the problem with our schools right now, is the access to internet and also the privacy restrictions. I know here within the New York City Department of Education, there are certain websites that are unfortunately banned. But I would encourage everyone who's working in the arts education environment to explore connected classrooms, and the Cultural Institute, you and I.
Well, hold on now. You're getting some, slow down. You're
we
on a
only
wild.
have 30 minutes.
I know, but I just want to go back to connected classrooms. We're getting a lot. I can watch people's attention spans on the attendees. Thing we would go down the road and consider a follow-up to this is, how do you use the connected classrooms, and then walk us through maybe one of your colleagues who's using it well, if you would be so kind.
We can totally set that up, and actually the colleague that I'm referring to is English teacher Mark Gway, and I have some information to share about some of the work he's doing at the end of this presentation.
Oh,
but
great.
Yeah,
okay.
Really today
Great.
is just a quick introductory overview of all of these amazing possibilities, and I would be really happy to go more in depth and continue to do a series around this topic.
Okay, good.
That would be great. Let's make that happen. And then lastly, this Cultural Institute. It's pretty amazing that Google is using their street mapping equipment, like these backpack cameras, to visually document cultural institutions, museums, and then go virtually inside of these buildings and looking at exhibits where you can actually zoom in to a piece of art. This is something that they've recently launched over the past couple months. I haven't explored it
I have. I'm an art history undergrad junkie, and I should have gone to grad school for that, but I went another route, and I cannot tell you how exciting it is to go in there and pull up, say, Picasso's, working in the color yellow, and you see all his sketches, paintings side by side. They got permission from these museums to share their work virtually. So for the first time in like 100 and something years, his notes are with his sketches, are with the paintings.
Right.
Oh, yeah, man, it's not history.
It's not like being there in person. I mean,
no, it's true. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
But for those who don't have the in-person access, it's fantastic. Okay, Twitter. So Twitter, I'm addicted to. Like I said before, I wrote a blog for Arts Blog about 2 years ago, and the running list had listed Twitter as an option, and got called out because I wasn't using Twitter, even though I wrote about it. So it really forced me to dive in, and I haven't stopped since. So Twitter, if you're not familiar with, it consists of these short 140-character tweets, which you have to get creative, and there is really a Twitter language that you would need to learn, but it's pretty easy to figure out. And then all of these photos and videos and tweets are shared in a feed. So the handle with the @ is basically your profile. So if you look over to the right, and I know I'm using JetBlue as an example. It's totally not arts education related, but I'll talk about that story in a minute. So my handle is Jessica L. Wilt. And then a hashtag you use you can create whatever you want as a hashtag. It's great for the searching tool. If you look at the top right, there's a magnifying glass. And if I were to write in arts ed, you would see everyone and anybody talking about things related to arts ed, which I find Twitter is really my go-to source for finding information in instant real time. And then you can favorite things. If someone posts something that you like, if you favorite it on Twitter, it's pretty much like a like on Facebook. So the way that I use Twitter and what I would recommend for anyone is set up a handle, and either it be your name, personal, or with an organization that you're affiliated with, or a school, if there are permissions to do that. And just start following people and just start retweeting content. You don't have to be really actively engaged putting out your own tweets initially right away. It's just a start in building your Twitter audience or your Twitter community. And then eventually you'll start engaging in conversation with people. And that's really when it starts to become fun and exciting. I truly
And I didn't
love
get it until that happened. I didn't get Twitter until that happened. I was like just tweeting and not like engaging, you know, like just pushing out.
right.
But
eventually
you taught me that. You taught me that.
You'll start talking to people. And as an aside, I am learning that Twitter is the best place for customer service. Even just this morning when I woke up and my Time Warner internet was down, I immediately tweeted Time Warner and got the problem fixed within a few hours, where, you know, you want to commit suicide when you call their 1-800 numbers, right?
I'm noticing on the screen that you
I use it
for the Arts Day.
Yeah. I mean, JetBlue is my favorite. They have a wonderful crew of social media. I posted last summer a photo from my summer vacation with my family and got this really cool tweet back. So it's fun. And I really would highly recommend that out of all of these platforms that I've briefly touched upon today, and I know there's a question or a statement, there's hundreds of options out there available.
That was a question.
If you go back, just really quickly, Christy, you go back one
to
the Twitter. No, back to the Twitter page.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I wanted to share, in case you're interested, there are Twitter chats that people have throughout the week, every week, based around a specific topic. And I've listed a few here that are really great ones to meet other people, follow other organizations, and gather great content. Edu2 is from the Queens Museum. They do that every Tuesday at 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. There are tons of STEAM chats that are happening. I'm co-moderating one with the Education Closet next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Arts Ed Tech is a hashtag that I use for the work I'm doing. Arts Ed is pretty much a standard general one, as is EduChat. Okay, next slide.
I love it. And you can make up your own if you want to start your own topic
just look at
or chat.
The JetBlue example, a little shy blushing now. They totally made that up. But it makes you smile, and it's a lot of fun.
Oops.
So there are two resources I highly recommend. This one just came out from Edutopia a couple months ago. Nice. 12 ways teachers are using social media in the classroom. If you just Google this, or if you just go to the Edutopia site or their Twitter handle at Edutopia, you'll be able to access this link pretty quickly. And it's wonderful, and it really is a direct resource for classroom teachers. You know, there is this myth that kids are too busy tweeting and Facebooking and Snapchatting, which I haven't even gone there yet with Snapchat. But we sometimes have to bring ourselves to the level of where our kids are. And the way that we communicate with each other is changing. The way our kids are learning is changing. And if we don't recognize that this is actually happening, we're going to lose a lot of our kids.
I saw a cool assessment. I saw a great way opera was being taught, where the teacher required all the kids to, she distributed a variety of operas, and they had to tweet their opera in one tweet. They only had 140 characters to sum it up and capture the essence of it. And then, yeah, it was so cool just to read all their tweets.
We've done workshops with Twitter and teaching Shakespeare.
You got to
Yeah,
do that for us.
it's 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 a lot of fun. Okay, next slide.
All right.
We're almost done.
Sorry
So
about
this
that.
is my friend Mark Guay, and he's an English literary arts high school teacher just outside of New York City. And he too has
Cool.
really become a social media expert and doing a lot of really neat things as an entrepreneur. He just wrote this wonderful ebook, Schools Gone Social. And if you tweet Mark, and the handle Mark W. Guay, he can send you more information about how to access this ebook. I really would suggest that you do that if this is something that you're interested in integrating into your classroom. And I think that's it
Super cool.
for me. I know that was like, wow, quickly went by. If
I
you
know.
do have
You're doing a
specific
good job.
questions, you are more than welcome to email me, jessica@jessicawilt.com. Send me a tweet at Jessica L. Wilt, and really would love to keep this conversation going. We could do a whole social media series and spend 30 minutes on just one of these social media platforms.
I would love, Jessica, I would love that, and I can tell you, I think that our audience would love that. And if you're willing and the tide don't rise, let's do it.
Sure, that would be great.
Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you especially to Jessica Wilt for contributing, taking something that looks kind of daunting if you're not familiar with it, or even if you are, and diving deep into 3 or 4 particularly important social media tools. So it was Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. That's what you covered, and then the Google, all the Google
Plus.
suite.
I've been having a lot of fun with Instagram lately, taking one photo of New York City every day just as a fun way to play around with figuring out how to use that app. But yeah, with anything, it takes a little time. Don't get frustrated. And if it's not working, dump it.
Hey,
Not like
we
you have to be a pro.
We got a question that right after we just talked about Twitter. Jessica, can you please speak a little bit about TweetDeck? That's from Laura Johnson, and she thanked you for a great overview.
Right. I love TweetDeck.
Talk about it.
And if I'm thinking it's what I'm thinking, so TweetDeck I think is like a Twitter wall. So if you go to conferences sometimes, or if I actually just did a panel a couple weeks ago with a college professor who uses a similar platform in his classroom. So he's got live tweeting happening as he's teaching his lesson. And basically it's just a wall that's projected of the Twitter feed.
We did that at, I just did that at a conference when I was with you guys in D.C. We were at the Arts Education Partnership, and they had
Right.
Oh, that's so cool. So there's so many ways to use that.
There's many other options available. Storify, I really like Storify, collects content around a hashtag. So you just put in ArtsEd as a hashtag, and it will curate the conversation around ArtsEd. And then you can, publish it as a link and share it on a blog or on your website. We could have done that today if we had live tweeting happening as we are speaking. So the resources out there, there's so many to choose from. So yeah, that's a great one.
Okay, I want to keep going, but I know we need to stop to respect everyone's time, although I want to keep going. So we're going to keep going, but we're going to stop today. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want, again, thank you, Jessica. And again, you could follow her. We'll be sharing this information with you. We'll give you the PowerPoint, the recording. It'll be on our website. And then Jess might send an email with a little follow-up list of links that I'll personally forward on to everyone that was in this session today. And I hope everyone has a great weekend. This is a good way to end a Friday.
Yay, TGIF.
Yay.
Hashtag
Thank you, everyone.
TGIF.
There you go.
Thanks, Christy.
Like us on Facebook. Like us forever. Thank you for liking us today. Have a great weekend.